Hello and welcome back once again to CBR MTG. My name is Angus McKay and today we're going to be starting a new series. This is called Format Shifted with X. Usually X is going to be the person that comes in as sort of an expert opinion. Today we're just running it solo, but look, I guess you can try me as your expert opinion because the reason that I wanted to start doing this series was because I saw a list, the 5-0'd recently, by YukiNaj01. So thank you, YukiNaj, for this wonderful 5-0 deck. And look, he 5-0'd with Hardened Scales Affinity in Legacy, and it was amazing. And we've seen this before in maybe like Jund and Blue-White Control and that sort of thing where like they cross formats. So it starts with, a modern deck or a legacy deck or a commander deck or something like that, and then you just shift the format. So this one is super simple, but before we go into that, I'd like to tell you about this new series. So each time that we have an episode, we will talk about the original deck, what it was trying to do, and then go through the new deck and what it's trying to do. And we'll hopefully be having an expert on the deck on either of the formats to sort of go through the specific lines and stuff like that. So trying something new, trying something different, please let us know in the comments below if this is something that you're more interested in finding out, because obviously CBR MTG, we're all about that innovation, all about that hustling. So let's go through this deck. So Hardened Scales Affinity was a branch off from regular Affinity, and it happened possibly due to the fact that Jund was quite popular and Blue-White Control started being more popular, and then Affinity has a really hard time versing those decks because all of the removal and the sweepers and the 1-for-1 removal really makes Affinity quite hard in Modern, because you're trying to attack with all these tiny little creatures, but the Hardened Scales gives you a bunch of resiliency. So instead of the normal list Affinity, you play Signal Pest and Cranial Plating, Master of Ethereum, Etch Champion. In this version, we're still hitting the the Ravagers and the Steel Overseers, but now we're playing Arcbound Worker, Hangerback Walker, Walking Ballista. This was, I believe, originally created by another YouTuber called Magic 8, so I'll link that in the description below. I believe this is the first instance of the deck, but obviously, people work on the same thing at the same time, so it's hard to say exactly. But what this deck brought to it was doing all the +1/+1 counters, and it makes it a lot better with removal because, as you can imagine, Fatal Pushing a Walking Ballista just doesn't really feel as good as killing a normal creature like Dark Confidant or something like that, because Walking Ballista, you just take all the counters off and ping someone. And same with Hangerback Walker, killing it with a Lightning Bolt or something if you can get in early will just make more Thopters. But you have to answer these threats, because with Arcbound Ravager you can move around the counters as much as you want and make giant Walking Ballistas or giant Hangerback Walkers, and then make a bunch of tokens, and then you're using 4 Hardened Scales in each of those decks to double up those +1/+1 counters. So for 1 green, it is a enchantment that says whenever a +1/+1 counter will be placed on a permanent you control, it gets 2 instead. So whenever you sack a artifact to Arcbound Ravager, you get 2, obviously very good with Steel Overseer, because instead of putting 1 counter on, you're putting many counters on, and it's been making the rounds in Modern. It's been doing quite well, and it looks like YukiNage01 decided that he would take it to Legacy and see what you can do. So for this Legacy port, we are keeping the 4 Arcbound Ravager, 4 Arcbound Worker, 4 Hangerback Walker, 4 Overseers and 4 Ballistas, so still the same sort of package. The 4 Ancient Stirrings, the 4 Hardened Scales, 4 Mox Opal, and the 2 Throne of Geth and the Welding Jars, but you're changing it up a little bit. We're adding 2 Metallic Mimics on Construct, as you can imagine. That's not played in the Modern version, but it's probably just a little bit faster and gives you immediate sort of value over playing Animation Module, which is what's played in Modern. Then you get a little bit of a power up with Tree of Tales, Ancient Tomb, and Wastelands, and that's about it. So you upgrade the mana base, you add $200 or $300 to the mana base, but if you already own Hardened Scales Affinity, then all you have to do is just add a few lands to the main deck, and then you suddenly have this pretty competitive Legacy deck. I mean, it is a brew, obviously, But you'll catch people by surprise, and if you're good at counting Ravager / Hardened Scales maths, you should be able to take it down pretty easily. By adding the Ancient Tombs, you're able to play your Arcbound Ravager on turn 1 very easily. Same with Steel Overseer, same with Hangback Walker on 1, same with Walking Ballista on 1. You know, like, all these things sort of happen around that 2-drop, and Ancient Tomb really powers that up. Obviously, playing Tree of Tales over Forest gives you a huge benefit as well, because it adds to Metalcraft for Mox Opal, and in a pinch you can sacrifice it to Arcbound Ravager. Coming out of the sideboard, it stays mostly the same. We have 3 in this list, for both Modern and Legacy. We have 3 Dampening Spheres, 1 Grafdigger's Cage, a couple of Shapers, Sanctuaries, Dismembers, Nature's Claims, Relic of Progenitor, Surgical Extraction. In Yukonag's list, we're adding a Jit and a Revoker to the sideboard as well. So we played this deck on a stream once, and we added a Sylvan Library to the main. So if you have one, definitely chuck that in. Probably over the Evolutionary Leap. We added the Jit to the main board as well, and added another one to the side, because Umezawa's Jitte, absolutely fantastic card for everything that we're doing. Unfortunately, it doesn't get the bounce up of triggers with the Hardened Scales, but you still get a little bit of value just by having a Jit on the battlefield. Really powers out those turns, and also it's an artifact, so it helps. The reason that you'd want to play this in Legacy is that aggro is kind of in a pretty good position right now. I mean, PleasantKenobi brought out a recent video, not that recent, but recent-ish, about playing Burn in Legacy, and just absolutely got thumped and wasn't very good at all. But I think out of the decks that we've played, being able to play aggro is huge in Legacy, because everyone's sort of spinning their wheels playing on the stack, and Modern is an aggro format, so you'll see a lot of aggro decks in Modern, but in Legacy it's more about fighting over the stack, not fighting over the battlefield. So you can kind of sneak under them, still get all those threats that are really hard to deal with on the ground, and, you know, maybe take your opponent by surprise. So moving forward with the series, we're going to help you. If you already have a Modern deck, especially with this one, you can just sort of accidentally jump into Legacy by only the price of a couple $100. Legacy is a pretty hard to get into format, and if you haven't been in it before the reserve list hike up, then it's going to be very hard to get in, with the price of Underground Seas being $500 each, or $600. Being able to upgrade your Modern deck to a fairly competitive Legacy variant is huge. So going forward, we'll be giving you great Modern decks that you can port to Legacy, and also maybe, you know, we'll go a couple of different ways as well. A good way to cheat is to take a Commander deck and add it to Legacy, because one of the fantastic things about Legacy is that you can play Commander cards like Najila the Blade Blossom or Amanatu, so keep an eye out for that. This has been Angus McKay. This is our format shifted deck tech series for CBR MTG, and have a wonderful day.